Good morning and welcome to the Bim Storm Big Bim Bang webinar for November 7th. This is live planning session number 2. My name is Kimon Onuma from Onuma Inc. Today we'll be having a session with Kaiser Permanente and HMC Architects and Gary Technologies and Los Angeles Community College and several others. We'll be showing some workflows that we've been developing and the process of this Bim Storm. I'd like to thank our sponsors for the Bim Storm this year, Balfour Beatty Construction, EcoBuild, Gary Technologies, Buxton Power, Infocom, Broadus, Trelligence, and VBN. Thank you very much for their support. And the owners that are participating, Kaiser Permanente, the Foundation of California Community Colleges, Mira Costa College, and Los Angeles Community College District Mission College. So we have recordings from previous webinars, but we kind of outlined the types of projects that are being focused on in this Bim Storm. So we have the Mira Costa Master Plan. We have 2 projects from Kaiser Permanente, the Glen Lake project and the Gwinnett project. Gwinnett is under construction. Glen Lake is in early programming. Los Angeles Mission College, focusing on COBE and going from construction into facility management, and the Mira Costa Master Plan that's ongoing in draft format right now. So in the California Community Colleges, we have a lot of districts. We're focusing on 2 districts, on Mira Costa and Los Angeles Community College. And today we will be looking at programming. There's 2 projects on Mira Costa where we have programming requirements that are going into design. So those are being submitted as part of the Bim Storm from Mira Costa in draft format. And the owner in that case is looking for how to review the designs as they come back into the different systems that are being used and compare the results. So today we're going to be starting with Mira Costa College. We have HMC Architects. They're the Mira Costa College owners representative for the master plan that's ongoing. It's in draft format right now. Deborah Shepley, the principal, the community college practice leader, and Dave Rova, the design principal, is going to be joining us. And we'll be explaining a little bit about where the master plan is. There's a website actually that's available to the public where you can get the draft version of the master plan, and there's some presentation videos there so you can kind of see a little bit of the background. What we're doing in the Bim Storm is Mira Costa College has allowed us to use this information as a background to define the projects that we're going to be focusing on. There are actual projects that are defined in the master plan, but they're obviously in the Bim Storm. We're using them as a way to engage the teams to participate. So Deborah and Dave, are you ready to speak?
Certainly.
Great.
Yes, we're here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, and we will maybe you can give a brief introduction of who you are and what you do and what you've been working on at Mira Costa. Then we'll open up the plan and take a look at it together.
Sure, I'll start. This is Deborah. About a year and a half ago, we were hired by Mira Costa College to develop the comprehensive master plan, and it's comprehensive in that it involves both the educational planning as well as the facilities master planning. We are in the final stages of this comprehensive master plan. In fact, the final report was printed last week and will be brought to the board this week for approval. So just a couple notes is that the master plan is a result of a lot of forward-looking thinking in terms of not just the facilities and the campuses within the district, but also where the educational programs are going, where the enrollment is going, what are their big institutional goals. All that information, because the first half of the planning process is really focused on the educational plan. We work with the Collegiate Brain Trust under the leadership of Eva Conrad leading that effort, and then we've translated all that information into the recommendations that you see really just on the campuses right now in terms of what will happen to each of the 3 campuses within the district. So on the plans, we basically have recommendations for new construction, renovation and repurposing of existing space. A number of buildings have been removed, and there are a number of site improvement projects on the campus as well. I'm not sure how much more you'd like.
Well, that's great. Maybe I could ask a few questions and kind of
Sure.
frame the planning scenarios that we're setting up here. So what we see on screen is actually an image from the master plan that you have been developing, inserted into the tools that we're using to organize the BIM storm. This is the Onuma system tool, and we also see a blue outline that is identifying the focus area of the BIM storm. So we're not looking at the whole campus, although it's available for reference, and we're going to be focusing on these two buildings, the instructional building 1, which is basically an athletics facility gymnasium, and the maintenance operations building for facilities up here, and also an area that is identified for potential solar photovoltaics. So maybe, Deborah, you can say a little bit about this area that we're going to be focused on, just some of the dynamics of it. There's a bridge crossing from this planning area into the main campus, and this is kind of an interesting area that's open up for the planning studies.
I'll start, and then Dave, you can jump in. But this is the main campus within Mira Vista College, as they refer to as the Oceanside campus. And the middle of the campus sits up on a plateau in the core, where you can see the library. That's in the middle of that flat area, and all the buildings surround it. The buildings in gray are existing. The lighter grays are existing to remain as is. The darker ones are having major repurposing, and then the blue buildings are the new buildings that fit in to the campus core, which gets expanded in this master plan. And the area we're focusing on in the BIM storm is the area surrounding on the east side of the campus. Because what happens is, in this master plan, is as the campus grows, as the enrollment grows, as the programs grow, basically the campus needs to grow. And the main extension and link of the campus core is over a bridge which runs over a road that's depressed below and reaches out to this instructional building over to the right. It is also an area where there'll be a lot of new parking, where people will balance the parking from the west side to the east side, and many people will be parking in that location, circulating through the building, across the bridge, and into the core of the campus. The maintenance and operations purchasing complex is interesting because it's sitting within what used to be a stadium, or what is currently a stadium bowl. But the college was not using that land, and it was a track and a field, but it's very underutilized. So if you look on any Google Maps, you'll see the sloping seating, basically, area all the way around. But it's a really interesting spot because that's been the recommendation for where the new maintenance and operations complex will go, to utilize that area, pull it out from the middle of the campus. So the interesting part is looking at the visual connections and also the vehicular and circulation connections within that bowl over to the campus. And Dave, anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, again, in a master plan, we are talking about setting a stage. We're talking about setting up something for the future as well as plans for today. Architecturally, what you're going to see on the models and what we have in the BIM storm right now are really diagrams of locations of these buildings and a little bit of sculpting, but in reality, these things will be brought up as projects, as you know, in the future. So what we've done is we've really set ourselves up with this stage to create something that the campus was really desiring in the beginning, and that was destinations. Not just destinations of instructional space and academic program, but also destinations for the students and student life. So as we're replacing a bridge that connects two parts of the campus, it really isn't a bridge anymore. We're creating a terrace, an area where students can gather and have a sort of the classroom outside of the classroom. We're separating buildings and sort of creating massing that would stage terraces and plazas in front to be able to make it a much more active zone. The area that we're concentrating on within the blue, this the one instructional building is really a gymnasium and dance studios and areas like that that really are active, and it would be able to draw students to this area and to these facilities if we were to create more indoor-outdoor spaces, not just the interior programmatic spaces. This new master plan really links the campus And if you'll notice when you look at the Google map, we now have large parking zones that connect on not only the perimeter of the campus, but over in the area that we're dealing with. So these connections of people and a program really are important here. So as you're looking at this, really think about that from the clientele perspective and the stakeholders, from the students to the faculty, and how these areas are really staging themselves. How's that?
Kimon, is that the level that you're interested in?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much.
Any specific questions?
Yeah, it triggered some questions based on what you were just saying. You mentioned the pedestrian bridge, the link. It's actually a very interesting bridge because as you're entering the campus, when I first went to the campus too, you notice this bridge, you drive underneath it as you're coming in, and then you loop around and get into the main campus. So it's kind of an entry point, as you mentioned. Is this part of, you mentioned a plaza, is this part of the, can we assume that this bridge can be part of this project here, as teams can work on these, or as far as a design element that can be looked at, or?
It is a design element, that's correct.
Okay, great.
And it is within the blue area, so I think as you have it shown, it does show like it would be part of it.
Okay.
Because the plaza in front of the instructional building then reaches across this wide bridge,
right,
which were more of a plaza.
Great. Okay, so that's a very interesting kind of design element. The other thing, just so the teams realize, there is a proposed building here, or an existing building that is in disrepair, I guess, and is proposed to be replaced with this new building, the instructional building number 3, which is an athletic facility.
Right.
So that's kind of part of the exercise here, is how do we update this, make this bridge part of that design element, put this program in for the new building, site it correctly so it fits within the planning document that you sent me last week that we have, so it shows the connection between the existing campus and the proposed building here. And so this existing facility is actually going to be, we can basically just place it off to the side here. This is going to be demolished.
Yes, and Kimon, one more thing on that. We've actually staged this or phased this portion of the project in the master plan so that facility, the existing facility, is in operation while we are building the second portion of the facility, its replacement, or the gymnasium portion and locker portion. And then phase 2 would be demolition of the existing facility and then bringing in the dance studios, fitness training centers, offices, conferencing, and all of that.
Okay, that's interesting. So we have this proposed facility in red, the existing one in yellow. Are you suggesting that maybe the gymnasium portion gets built first while this one's still in operation, and then it phases over to this part?
Yes,
that was in the plan, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We have to look at some of the alignment here because we have, this is always a challenge when you have a lot of different background data. We have the Google map, and then we have the image. Let's see, let's turn on some of the higher resolution Google map. So we're trying to get things in alignment. The other thing that's interesting on Miracosta, that's a correct pronunciation, by the way. I guess I was correct last week. It's Miracosta, correct?
Yes.
There is actually GIS, or Geographic Information System, data available. We don't have it shown here in the map yet, but hopefully we're going to get some more detailed data that might show us exact alignment of the bridge and the buildings. So this proposed building, actually, the idea is that it would be on axis with the pedestrian bridge, and there's an existing building that is shown here, and I'm not sure if this is the exact location. We're using the GIS data that's available from the district to place that. So there's some study that needs to go on about how the sequence is. So that's a very interesting thing that you talked about, of keeping the existing building in operation while this new one comes in. We also understand that there's a realignment of the ball fields here that are right now in what's marked as proposed parking. So the parking is coming in here. The ball fields are moving to the north of that. I think we discussed that solar...
Kimon, this is Young. Let me just interrupt you real quickly. I think your screen may be stuck, so you may have to... I'm not sure if you're changing your screen, but nothing else is happening.
Oh, okay. How's this? I just refreshed.
You can see the master plan on it.
Okay, what do you see now?
No, nothing is happening. Okay, there we go.
Okay. Oh, that's strange. It was stuck, I guess. Okay, so I was talking about this existing building here and the proposed building and the bridge across and the existing, the proposed parking that's taken over the existing fields. So if we turn off the background map, we can actually see the existing fields are there, but the proposed fields are actually moving to the north, and the parking's taken over the existing area here. I think, Deborah, you were mentioning that this parking area is not open for solar photovoltaics because of the potential issues with the neighbors, so we're not proposing any solar photovoltaics on this
Correct.
parking, but we are proposing it on this northern parking area up here. So let's move on to that.
Purple area, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so the purple area here is proposed solar photovoltaics. There was a question last week from somebody in the audience, an engineer, I believe, that was saying the alignment of these is probably not optimal if this is truly north, and so that's actually a question of how to actually configure them, and they go east, west, or north, south, and that's going to be up to the teams to propose. We just placed them here as kind of a concept that we want to study this as a project for placing solar photovoltaics.
Absolutely. In fact, the layout of the parking lot isn't, the whole design of the parking layout as well as the PVs is open. And it extends beyond to the left area where that purple is, because those buildings, those tan buildings are going away, so there's more room there.
Right. So we could say, okay, that possibly it's better to go this way, and these tan buildings are being demolished. They're moving away, so we actually have some more area there. So this is actually another study area for a team that is very familiar on how to lay out parking and sort of solar photovoltaics. As part of the
and then keeping in mind that
go ahead.
There is a circulation. There is an important access and circulation to the top.
Mm-hmm.
It's off your screen right now, that connects over to the maintenance and operations complex.
Yes.
So
right.
The road continues above and then down across the back.
You're talking about right here?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so the circulation on this whole study area is interesting because there's vehicular circulation, there's new parking, there's new buildings, there's this bowl area that the maintenance and operation is sitting in, and there's an upper area up here for activity fields. So how does this, the whole vehicular and pedestrian circulation work on this side of the campus? There's an axis that's been defined in your master plan of how this parking area connects back to the main campus. So there's kind of a very interesting dynamic being set up for the teams here. All right, so let's see a couple more things here. So we have this set up in the Onuma system. This is going to be made accessible to the teams, and the workflow that we're studying, that's kind of interesting. This also just came in just in the last couple of days, but the way that the community college set up projects for funding, for defining projects, they're called initial planning proposals. Let's see, there's a question that's coming in. Is this the latest site plan? If so, what happened to the athletic field baseball soccer? The athletic baseball soccer is being moved right here. The new location of a soccer field and new location of a softball or baseball. Yeah, go ahead.
I can answer that question. Those fields show how that area could be configured, but the activity fields are meant to represent activity fields to be determined. What's happening here is they're changing some of their fixed fields and creating more multi-use athletic recreation areas.
Okay.
So on the master plan drawing, right now we see softball and soccer. That's not specifically how it would be laid out. It would be more like it's shown on the master plan drawing that you had prior.
As an open field.
As an open field area where multiple activities could take place.
So like this. So not really a layout like this. It would just be an open field here. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
All right. So we could actually probably zap these, but they do show up kind of as a suggested area, but it's a big open area basically that can be multi-purpose. Okay.
You can understand the scale by bringing those in.
Right. Okay. The other question was, since you have a sloping area, why not stack the parking to free up more athletic field space? I'm assuming that this question is talking about the area over the maintenance and operation building. This is a bowl here, correct? Or are they talking about this area here? I'm not sure. I don't think this is...
It's probably the area to the front or below the red new building.
Right here?
Within the bowl.
Oh,
No, further up.
Oh, in the bowl area.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, during the planning process, that entire bowl was looked at as one point of an area to create structured parking. But due to the cost, and it was chosen not to pursue that, although it might be something to consider in the future. And they were able to get the complete target number of parking just using surface parking, which is a lot less expensive, more cost-effective. So the solution was to not build structured parking, but that area is being held in front of the complex just in case it might be needed in the future.
Okay. So there's some studies that could happen there as well. And the goal of this, the BIMStorm process here, is as a team starts submitting their designs. In fact, as we were moving things around here, this is kind of the interaction that would be pretty interesting. If somebody has an idea and says, well, here's what we think could happen here, then it'd be great if you guys from HMC can actually respond and say, well, here's some issues with that approach.
Yeah, we can definitely.
Yeah, that's great. There was a question about the location of the bridge. The bridge is right here. There's a road underneath here. The bridge goes across from the main campus here and leads into this athletics area here. Okay, so another really important part to this workflow is, as I mentioned, the Foundation for California Community Colleges manages a system called Fusion, where planning proposals are submitted. And these planning proposals come in as these blocks here. So there's a planning proposal for new buildings coming in here, and also these red buildings. So the data for these buildings is actually coming from their database directly. It actually automatically generates the blocking and stacking model, which looks like this. This is actually updated from last week's session because we got the new planning proposal data. So this is the athletics building and the actual spaces inside that building. And we would like the teams to use this as a starting point, either to configure this whole discussion about how do we phase the gymnasium with the existing building could happen here, or to take this out into other planning tools like Revit or SketchUp or whatever and continue on. The main thing is we want to track this requirement of how many square feet these spaces are as a team start working on the design. And this is available for both the athletics building and the maintenance operation building. So later on this week we will be giving access to this project to the teams now that we have the more detailed data available. We have the discussions going on about the planning scenarios here. We'll be posting this discussion we're having right now as an animation on the BIMStorm.com website. So I think we should move on. Let's see, were there any questions? I think there are other questions out there, but I think we'll move on and try and address other questions toward the end so we can get through the other parts of this webinar. Okay, so thank you very much to HMC for participating in this and being the owner's representative from a planning perspective to help guide the teams as they work on these projects. Okay, so let's move on to the next portion. So next we'd like to talk a little bit about the Kaiser Permanente project. We have Stephen Cox and Alexander Hare and Jajun Lin from Kaiser Permanente. They've been on a previous webinar, so we won't go into the details of these projects. We're going to go into other information about these projects. This is a Gwinnett project in Georgia, which this is a Revit model. There's a SketchUp model. We actually have these models from Kaiser Permanente submitted, and you'll be seeing a little bit more of that later as we get the Gary Technologies team online to talk about the GTX tool. The project is under construction, so the goal here on this project is to look at opportunities of how building information model data can move from design and construction into operations and maintenance. We're obviously not going to solve everything inside the project. We're just looking to identify opportunities and workflows, and we invite teams that are using COBE and BIM working on getting data into this part of the project. The Kaiser team, would you guys like to say anything more about the Gwinnett project as we move along here?
Yeah, come on. This is Alex here, the Senior Project Manager. A couple of things that might be key for everybody to know, and I don't know if we've actually gotten you the data yet, but we are using the Vela FM package on this project. So as we are commissioning and testing equipment, we are recording that data and using the Vela service for that, which I think might be very useful for some of the teams as they move forward.
Right. Yeah, that's great. And actually, I'm going to be meeting with the Vela team in Boston this week at Build Boston to discuss more about these kind of workflows. But yeah, the whole process of going from BIM into commissioning the building and then into facility management, Vela has tools that are very powerful in collecting that type of data from the field. And it's pretty exciting to see all this stuff coming together. So I think being able to share what this project is doing is really important for the industry and for the BIMStorm. Is one of the goals that we have here, is to see what we can do with this data, and having Vela involved is very exciting.
Come on.
Yeah.
Come on, there was one other thing I thought of since we've talked last. The other thing the way we set the project up is we had the mechanical engineers hire the mechanical subcontractors to do the drafting, so that we would try to minimize coordination and modeling costs by the engineers of record and the subcontractors.
Right.
So the subcontractors drafted in AutoCAD MEP and other versions, and one of the issues we've had is getting the intelligence from those so that they could create their spooling models in the AutoCAD MEP back into Revit, and how we combine all of that as we move forward into getting our engineering and operations team a good intelligent model for the future.
Right. That's actually a very interesting question, because one of the other projects in the BIMStorm is the Los Angeles Community College District Mission College, which I'll be showing a little bit of today as well. And they're almost at the same phase now. They're in construction, and they're getting ready to release a specification of how do you take data from construction into operations if it's not even in the BIM. And that's actually a very important question, because there's a lot of data coming in during construction that would not be in the Revit model, for example. And there's a specification that we've been working on with LACCD that defines that. Okay, how do you consume data from the Revit model, plus how do you get data from the field, from other parts of the process that might not be in the BIM? So it does not necessarily all have to be in the model, and we can kind of explore what that really means as we look at the other projects. And that's one of the goals of this BIMStorm, is to kind of cross-pollinate, because the issues relating to this Gwinnett project are very similar to what's happening in LACCD. I'm hoping that we can have interesting discussions on how that could work. All right. The other project is, we just received this information recently from Glen Lake, and this is kind of the program, a project that's in programming phase right now. And do you guys want to talk a little bit more about that? I have a few slides here, then I'll show some live information as well.
Sure. This is Steve Cox. The project's kind of coming into the SD phase, so the program's been somewhat finalized, but we're roughly looking at a project that's in the 120 to 130,000 square foot range, with various adds, and some shell space was added to the project. A whole floor was added in shell space to the project just in the last month. But the project is moving, like I said, into SD, and the figure and shape of the building is coming together. The exciting part for us is that our scope of services was pretty clear that we wanted to define all the mechanical systems up front, and the architectural team with their mechanical engineer are doing that now, which is somewhat unusual for us in that we usually end up doing that in the DD phase, and we're now doing it in the SD phase, and that's really being driven by BIM and the needs for BIM to establish that stuff early. The same can be said of the civil. This is the first project we're modeling in civil, so it's progressing very well and early. So I guess the best thing I can report out of this project is that, you know, we've established a program, and we're really starting to kick off our BIM process, and it's early in the project, which is it's something that's new, but everybody on the team is very excited about that.
Okay, great. We're having a few questions coming in for the Kaiser teams. Can you elaborate on where the commissioning data in the system is retrievable by the FMO staff in the building in the future? I'm assuming they're talking about how the data is going to be shared. For both of these projects, actually Gwinnett in particular, since it's the end of construction, we have access to the BIMs and other related data, which is going to be shared with the participants. Some of this is going to be exploratory of how can this move into FM, but as was mentioned, Vela is being used as one of the tools, and Vela is a COBE compliant tool. So we're going to be possibly exploring of how data can move back and forth between the different tools using standards like that. Is building the number one a parking garage with hospital above? I'm not sure which building number one, which project were we referring to. Is I guess it's this one here, the Glen Lake project. The parking, I believe, is on there's existing parking on the left and a proposed parking on the right. I don't believe there's parking underneath building number one. Is that correct?
That is correct. Parking garage number one is existing, and obviously the white building number one is existing, but it will be about, I'd say probably half renovated in this project.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So building number one is kind of a renovate. One of the buildings, let's see, building number one or two is a partial renovation, and the other one is a new building attached to.
Building number one is kind of a restack and renovate project.
Right.
And building number two is all new.
Yeah, so building number one is on the left here, and building number two is all new, and then there's a new parking structure to the right of building number two.
Right, that's about 750 spaces.
Right. And we have a preliminary blocking and stacking diagram that we received, and I'll show a little bit of the results of that because we also received an Excel file that has all of this data, the programming requirement data for Glen Lake, which we will share with the teams as well. And we also took that into BIM by importing it into the Onuma system. So we have a blocking model of, in fact, let me show a little bit of that because that could be interesting to see. So we have a couple things. There was another question that came in, will there be a sandbox available for the testing of the FM, CMMS sandbox? And yes, that's the intent. We want to be able to try and get some of this data into a format. Specifically, COBE is one of them that we want to see if we can move data from the design and construction into CMMS. And participants who log in and are part of this project can get access to that. So here's the Gwinnett project. We actually started importing some of the Revit models and things that are coming in from the Kaiser team in there. And we also parked the programming requirements. One of the workflows that we want to show is how does programming requirements coming in from Excel, how do you start comparing, well, here were our requirements, now how's the design matching up to that? More of that's going to happen on the Glen Lake project because we're in the programming phase on that. So we will have more data on that. So here's the Glen Lake project. What we did receive is let's see. The programming requirements from Glen Lake were in an Excel format, and the Excel format looks kind of like this. It's actually a pretty intense Excel document with multiple tabs for each department. The first tab actually has a summary, a space summary of the different departments. There's 23 departments. Here are the departments listed right here, the square footage, and the department number, and some other classification of functional groups information. And then each of these departments has a separate tab that goes space by space and identifies the space and the square footage and how many spaces there are. So teams can, in the blocking and stacking phase, obviously the diagram that we saw earlier is kind of more focused on kind of a departmental view. So we could just focus kind of on, some teams could just focus on using this data, which is much more straightforward than diving into the hundreds of spaces, although there could be some teams where we had in previous BIM storms where some teams said, well, we want to focus on one department and actually go down to the room level and lay that out. So what we've done is we've taken the background image and put it into the Onuma system with the site plan. We've brought in the buildings, and we've actually imported the program, like the comprehensive medical, the building number 2. If we open that up, it actually has the Excel data that came from Glen Lake, blocked and stacked with the actual data and ready to be used in BIM. So the teams that participate here will actually be able to pull this into Revit or other BIM applications and SketchUp and do the planning studies. We layered in the background data here, and here are the spaces. There's still some questions about where these are located, but that's part of the planning process is back and forth to understand what where the owner wants to place these spaces. The same thing for edition number 2, and then also we took one suite, I believe it was surgery outpatient rooms, and actually went down to the room level. So we've translated the Excel file into this blocking and stacking model that will be available for the teams. Okay, I think we have some questions here. Can you describe the technology used to do the blocking and stacking diagram shown? Okay, what I just showed you is in the Onuma system. We set up the Excel files and automatically generate the blocking models. There are other tools, other team vendors that are involved with the BIMStorm. There's Trelligence that's also going to be involved that has a similar functionality. We are going to be parking the programming requirements in the Onuma system, and then we're going to be showing connections back to Trelligence and Revit and everything. The intent here, it's called a blue dot and a red dot in the Healthcare BIM Consortium that Kaiser is involved with. We want to see owner requirements and track them through the design, all the way from the early planning to the design and even into construction. Okay, the original requirements in the Excel file say that we need a certain kind of room, and those rooms need certain kind of functionality. How are we tracking that? You know, the air changes of the temperature of an operating room, for example. That's a BIM. At this point, it is a BIM in our world because we want to see how do we track these. And if you look at this, there's literally thousands and thousands of pieces of data. So it gets very complex as the project goes on to manually track this. So we want to show processes that help to track the data in a BIM format as the project progresses. Okay, other question. Our web TMA solution is COBie compliant. I would be happy to provide a demo solution of Sandbox for TMA's CMMS solution. I guess this is from Wade Quinton. Yes, we're definitely looking for other COBie tools that are out there, or BIM tools that can tie into all of this, and that's the intent of the BIMStorm, is to show connectivity and to test different ways of working. Okay, let's move on to the next. Unless there are any other questions, we'll be posting a lot of this stuff. But so there's a lot of data, obviously. But for participants, when you jump in, you'll get more and more details on this. Kaiser team, was there anything else relating to what we just saw here?
Yes, Kamo. This is Xiaojun Lin. You pretty much touched on most of the stuff that we were very interested in seeing the result of. One more piece I'd like to add is in both of these projects, in addition to extracting the BIM model information into, say, an FM system, we are also very interested in looking at taking the information that was starting from the design space program level through design construction phase and then back into a space management system,
right.
Something like Archibus or something similar to that.
Right.
And again, at the same time, you know, arrange the information or something so we can basically have something to organize the information against, say, something like COBie category, and then to see if that's actually something efficient that we can then, at the end of the day, bring it back into our space management system as well as our FM system, because they are currently separately, without having a lot of manual processing.
Right, exactly. So it's the same data going all the way from the early, well, we're thinking of doing a building, we need to meet these requirements. How does it go into design and construction? How does it go into FM? How does it go into different tools like Archibus or TMA or whatever it might be? And how do we keep the data neutral so we can use many different tools so we're not stuck to just one format? And I think that's a reoccurring theme throughout all these projects. Okay, great. Let's move on. We want to get Dennis Sheldon on right after this, but before Dennis comes on, I want to show one more thing. This is the LACCD project from Mission College. I don't know if Tina, if you're online, you can say a few words here too, but this is Pankow. Construction is in the middle of construction of this project, design build project. LACCD is using this project to test COBie workflows. So there's a specification of how data can be captured in the design and construction process to flow into facility management systems. In LACCD's case, they're heading towards SAP. So how do we get data in a neutral format again into COBie that goes into SAP? So that's part of the specification of this. This is actually the model imported from Revit, the programming model basically, but it's actually the same model that Dennis is going to show us next. This is actually a very Tina, if you're on, do you want to say a few words before we move on, or should we go on?
If you do you have time, or do you want to keep moving?
Say a few words. Yeah, that's great.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So basically, the owner has a $6 billion bond program going on, and they realize that there's a lot of information coming in, and they want to get that information into their facility management systems and also integrate their GIS and their energy systems. So it's a pretty big effort that's going on here. The part that I've been specifically working with the NUMA on is identifying what is the information that is gathered in the design and construction phases that needs to transfer into the facility management phase, and how do we transfer that data. And I think we're really realizing that the planning begins right from day one. You know, how do you structure data so that you're moving it along the entire process and not recreating it over and over again? And what is that ultimate data that that facility management team is going to need to manage their facilities? And then also, what do they need if they need to renovate in the future? So it's really understanding that everything that's being generated and how to get it in and constantly use it. And it looks like some of it's in BIM. It looks like other of it is in some type of data processing format. You know, so it's really, we need to structure that data so that it's exchangeable between all the different systems that are being employed throughout the life cycle of a facility.
Perfect. And that's actually a very important point, because what was asked earlier by the Kaiser team is how do we get data from a project that is in BIM that might not be in the BIM. So during the construction process, how do we get data into facility management that might be coming from other sources? The message really is that it's a hybrid approach. It shouldn't be required to be all jammed into the model, because a lot of things happen during construction. There might be data being delivered about a piece of equipment that might, if it's in a structured format, we can get it back into COBE format and into the facility management tools. And that's specifically what's happening with this Mission College. So it's really exciting that LACCD is sharing this project as well, that we'll have access to the Revit models and other information from the project. Alan Edgar says we should encourage people to start using the OmniClass Table 13, which, yes, I agree with that. Everything here is kind of also tied to OmniClass, the COBE specification as well. So there's a lot of these industry standards that we don't have to reinvent. And if we all start talking the same language, then it really facilitates this flow of information. Okay, let's...
Simone?
Yeah.
Simone?
Yeah.
I also think it's really important for everybody to recognize we start talking about these OmniClass tables, and they're kind of in flux. So we're on to our next version of OmniClass, which didn't keep the same format. So it's a little bit of a struggle implementing them while they're still being developed.
Yeah, that's always a challenge, and we brought that up ourselves too, is that if these standards are shifting, it makes it very difficult for owners to implement. So this is actually a perfect venue to put that out on the table and say, here's what we're struggling with. So I'm glad you brought that up. So that's always a challenge with all these standards. How do you make it work? And I'm very excited this year to have Gary Technologies introducing their new tool, GTX, which is a web-based, it's a model server that in real time can visualize and share very detailed models. So we're connecting this process with the ONUMA system, where we have these programming models, for example, that say here's a programming requirement, then all of a sudden we have detailed Revit models that come in, or other BIMs that come in that can be viewed in Gary Technologies, and we can actually have a link across. So Dennis, if you're ready, we'd like to hear a little bit more about what Gary Technologies is doing. And this is some of this stuff is going to be brand new. It hasn't really been talked about, and we're glad that you're part of the BIMStorm as a sponsor and also as a participant supporting the project here. Dennis, do we have audio with Dennis yet? We don't hear your audio. Maybe I'll talk a little bit more as Dennis starts to work out his audio, but GTX is a web-based tool, and everybody will have access to the GTX tool that's participating in the BIMStorm, as well as the ONUMA system tool, as well as other tools that other vendors are going to be throwing into the mix. Dennis, we don't have your audio yet. We're having some audio problems with Dennis. Hello. Maybe I'll start introducing some things about Gary Technologies. It's you log in, and each user gets a password and a login. There we go. There we go. Okay, welcome.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. I'm coming to come in through the net, as I was on a speakerphone before. Thanks very much. I'm going to give you guys just a very brief intro to GTX and talk a little bit about the ambitions of what we're doing with the Bim Storm, but we're very excited to be part of this. So let's see, basically, and my sound may be a little bit bad because I'm not on a great internet connection here. But anyway, briefly, GTX is a web-based 3D file management and project collaboration system. Supports BIM through a number of these kind of emergent technology paradigms, kind of cloud-based things. And so you'll see aspects of technologies like Dropbox and Skype and Facebook, kind of those kind of ways of interacting with data, but centered around the building information model. Cheap, easy to use, and install and maintain. It's basically software as a service, so you're up in basically a minute. And supports, you know, a range of neutral. We're trying to be very neutral, so we support all kinds of different 2D and CAD formats. We think most interestingly allows project managers and other non-modelers to use 3D, and we're hoping also to see this as the technology to manage data after the project is completed. This is basically the vision, which is you model in any format, model with any tool. And GTX does the conversion to a neutral object system on the back end. So, you know, this is essentially what we're driving for. You know, you can pretty much model in any technology and then view any device with the information going up to the cloud. And then from there, you know, GTX supports not just BIM, but a whole bunch of other, you know, documents that are part of the project data set. You know, Word documents and images, etc. And then we do a lot of the sort of the classic coordination and measuring, clash, all that stuff on the cloud. Let me just kind of, just because I guess I burned some time, very quickly go into just a quick view of GTX, and everybody who's on the Bim Storm will get an account. It's basically in what's called a beta mode right now. And we're letting everybody that is on Bim Storm use it essentially through the end of the first quarter of next year at no cost. These are the project listing, and we've started building up some of the projects already, importing some of the data that we're getting from the you know, the owners and the managers. Just give this. Maybe I'll be quiet for a second. Okay, so. I guess in the interests of preserving network connectivity, I won't go too much into detail here.
So let me ask a question, Dennis, as this is
okay,
coming up.
So this is the basic front end to this project, the Gwinnett Medical Center. You can see kind of the feed of files being added, and you know, people joining, etc. We always have these kind of light 3D previews for every file, so you can very quickly kind of take a quick view of what's going on. And then the heart of this thing is really kind of a 3D and other file. You know, as I said, we sort of support lots of different file types. Here you see kind of, you know, basic 2D drawing. But let's just get into the heart of it. I've got the Revit model from Kaiser Permanente. We've got a SketchUp model of the site, and I'll just bring these different models together and say view in 3D. So you don't need to convert one format into another in order to bring this data together. So it's now streaming both files over the web. I'm just gonna let's see very quickly. It's almost done, but I'll just zip over to. Oops. Go back there. So that one more time. Okay, and you can see the BIM model and the site model are now kind of coming together in 3D. Very easy kind of navigation of all this BIM information, so I can turn off the site and just show the Revit model. I can turn off the architecture and just show things like the furniture and the equipment, and then do very simple things like quick sectioning. So if you want to just get a plan view out of the model, there you go. Okay, so, and then we'll get into a lot more of this later, but the ability to very quickly generate sort of quantity takeoffs and measuring and things like that. So I will just very quickly pull up a quick report, and then Kimon, maybe I'll turn it over to you. But the goal of our involvement in this exercise is essentially we are making these data repositories of all the project data. Here you can see very quick quantity takeoffs of different portions of the building, and other types of reports like window schedules, door schedules, and the like. And all of this stuff can then be exported to Excel, and increasingly we'll look at other ways of handling and managing that reported information. So the goal will be essentially to give everybody on the BIMStorm access to these project data repositories. We're starting to build them up sort of project by project, and then you'll have the ability to create your own projects, your own designs, and your own work in the context of this data, and just sort of mash up your project work with what's there already. Kimon, I don't know if you wanted to show just the interaction with Unuma system that we went over yesterday.
Sure, we can do that. We have a few minutes left, but yeah, Dennis, thanks. This is very exciting. When I first saw this, I thought, wow, this is really a game changer. I'm getting some feedback here from somebody's mic, but one important point is just the interconnectivity between different tools. So what I showed earlier with this model in the Unuma system that originated from Mission College Revit model that was imported into Unuma was then exported as an IFC and imported into GTX. So GTX can consume a lot of different types of data, including IFC models and Revit models and SketchUp and other Rhino models, and mash them all together, kind of like a Navisworks on the web. The fact that it's on the web makes it easily accessible to everybody. The fact that it has different types of capability, not just one type of tool or one type of format, makes you be able to look at IFC models and Revit models together, for example. The other important point for BIM, this has been a theme for BIMstorms all along the way, is that there are desktop applications that are incredibly powerful and used like Revit and ArchiCAD and Bentley, a very important part of the BIM process. But we also have when you have these kind of web-based tools, it kind of changes the whole perception of how you deal with information. That it can be accessed by anybody through a web browser, through tablets and iPhones and Androids, and it makes it very easy to work together. Did somebody have a question? No? Okay, let's keep going. So we're going to be exploring how this link between GTX and Unuma can function, but one very simple way is to basically have a direct link. So if I know that there's an IFC model live in GTX on the Unuma side, I can actually create a link to that, and basically because we're both on the web, that link will actually take me directly to that GTX model. So we really want to explore that kind of connectivity, and we're also talking about how to get data back and forth as well too. And this stuff can move pretty quickly, and when you get on the web, you start seeing many different ways of being able to link back and forth like this. So in the Unuma side, for example, we have a link to the GTX model, and boom, you click on that and it opens up the model on the GTX side. Okay, so we're getting close to the end of the hour here. I have a few more points unless there's some other questions, but I think we're done. We might have to leave some of the questions behind. We have a lot of people online. We'll try and answer them in future webinars and through our website. I encourage everybody to join in on the BIMstorm. You join in by going to bimstorm.com and we have a blog as well, so there's a link to a blog, and the first thing to do is basically to sign up and say I want to be part of this. So anybody that was online today that said we want to use our tool or our process or our capabilities in the BIMStorm, you go to the bimstorm.com site, and there's a sign up page right here where you sign up, and there's a form there, and there's information about the webinars and the recordings. I'm going to get on the soapbox a little bit here in the last 5 minutes. What we just saw with GTX and what we're just demonstrating with these different tools, the web tools and desktop tools and the open standards, and what we're hearing from the owners in the BIMStorm about wanting to get data throughout the whole life cycle of a project, all the way from the early design to the end of construction and into the life cycle. There's obviously not going to be a single tool that can do all this. And even though I'm a big proponent of open standards and building smart, I fully support IFCs and the need to be able to use these open standards. I also feel that there's not enough discussion about how else can we get data to move. It can't be one way or the other, and I'm very concerned that some of the discussions turn into it must be all in IFC or it must be all in this. As soon as you say it must be all in one thing, you start limiting yourself. And just like you saw with GTX and the same thing with Onuma, there's many different formats. There's IFCs, there's Revits, there's whatever, and you can merge them all together. And just like we're seeing with the LACCD COBE project, there's data that is floating out there that is not inside the BIM that the owner still wants to get to. If we require everything to be put into the BIM and then out to IFC, it kind of just kills everything. We have to have that flexibility to allow even very simple formatted data that's not Building Smart compliant or not IFC to be able to make its way into the building process. And that's something that I'm feeling that a lot of the industry, including a lot of my colleagues, really don't understand yet. It's kind of a very big concern. So part of the BIMStorm goal is going to be at EcoBuild, we're going to bring these discussions to the forefront and really want to explore what we can do with this. So I really thank everybody for jumping in. We're at EcoBuild. You don't have to be there in person, but we're going to have a big area on the show floor. We're going to call it the Bim Storm Sandbox. It's a sandbox that everybody can jump into virtually or there, and we want to explore a lot of these challenges that owners and the industry are having, explore interoperability and open standards and data in open standards that is in many different formats, XML and IFC and COBE, and it's a very exciting time in the industry, and I believe that those that are participating in processes like this will become leaders, and we really have to do this together. There's no single organization or group that can solve all these problems, and as we start collaborating, solutions start coming up pretty rapidly. And that's the intent of the BIMStorm. We're really merging things together. Are there any final words from the participants that we have online? Thank you very much to HMC and to Kaiser, LACCD, Dennis from Gary Technologies, and thank you to all of our sponsors for supporting this. And we will have a session next week on the 22nd. It's on our website. You can actually log in and get online and sign up for the next session. You don't have to participate in every session. We'll be recording them, but and we will be giving access to this project data to teams that have signed up. So please do sign up. Please jump in and even participate just for as short amount of time as you want or as long as you want. We'll be heading into EcoBuild in December and then be showing the results in January, up to January and February of next year to the owners that would like to get presentations of how the teams collaborated on this. So I believe we're done. We're right at the hour right now, and we will sign off. Thank you everybody for joining us. This is Kimon Onuma for the BIMStorm Big Bim Bang at Washington, D.C. It's kind of a tongue twister, but there's a lot going on, and we thank you for participating. Signing off.